Welcome back to I'm a Nurse, and I used to work at a haunted nursing home. Here are my stories, and for this episode, I do have a guest here with me. But before we get into the story, I just want to give you a little bit of background. So, on this dark and spooky night, I was working on the first floor. She was working on the second floor. And I had a resident that was a 1-to-1, meaning he had to have a caregiver stay in the room with him. That caregiver went out on her break. I had to go into the room and sit with him while she was on her break. During that time, I walkied for assistance to come down and give me a hand with getting all of my residents checked on, changed, and taken to the bathroom. And at that point, she comes downstairs, and I'm in the room. The caregiver comes back. I come out, ready to get to business, and all of a sudden, we get a call on the walkie from myself and the nurse, because at the time, we were not nurses. We were only in nursing school, and we were just CNAs. So without further ado, let me introduce everybody to Carly.
Hey.
Carly is my cousin. She is also a nurse. She also was my coworker there and other places. So let's backtrack and let's revisit the scariest, most terrifying event that we have experienced while working at our previous facility.
Scariest by far for me and her.
Literally terrifying. And you won't believe it because most people don't believe it when we tell it. So for this night, we were, like I said, business as usual, doing what we do. All of a sudden, this one calls on the walkie saying, Angela and nurse, you both need to get down here right now. Mm-hmm. And she tells us the room number.
Yep.
My initial thought was, oh no. This person, the resident, we will call her Sarah for the sake of this video. I'm thinking Sarah fell. So I go running over. When I go running over, she's like, look in the room. And I'm like, what do you mean? She was like, look in the room.
Yeah, I didn't touch nothing. I left everything so they could see it.
Mind you,
I didn't touch nothing.
I had not been in the room since about 11. And this was probably like somewhere between like 1:30-ish, because we used to check on everybody and do rounds like that every 2 hours. So I pushed the door open. Immediately to my right is the bathroom. The bathroom light was on, and then the rest of the room was to the front of me. The light was off. At that point in time, we look over. The resident is sleeping soundly in the bed.
Out cold. Knocked out.
But
deep sleep.
but, I take one glance in that room, and I'm like, what the fuck happened here? Mm-hmm. And
I think the bathroom was to the left.
Yeah, it was to the left.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't know my left and right. Anyway,
okay.
Nonetheless, doesn't make a difference.
No,
bathroom light was
but
on.
That bothered me. Anyway, go ahead.
So, I glanced down, and the resident had a bedside table that was like a corner table, and had photos, like family pictures and stuff in little frames, a photo of Jesus, a little vase with some artificial flowers in it, all on that table. When I look into the room, all of the pictures that were on that table are face down, and they are leading a trail from where the table was in the corner around and into the bathroom. Face down. Additionally, the photograph of Jesus was
so weird.
Face up on the floor.
Oh, God.
Smashed over top of it was the vase and the artificial flowers.
So there's glass everywhere, mind you.
Glass everywhere. But the one thing that is physically impossible for this resident to have done, the table was in the bathroom, placed over top of the toilet.
Of her toilet.
It had 3 legs, so it's not one that you could just slide over the toilet.
Right.
It was picked up and placed over it. And we had to clean these items up. That table was heavy. I lifted it.
And also, it's like, all right, we checked her feet and everything. No blood, no nothing. No signs of, like, walking. Like, her feet would have been bloody. Mm-hmm. As much glass as there was.
She would have had cuts.
Absolutely.
Would have had cuts. The amount of glass, I'm pretty sure I ended up cutting my finger when we were picking the stuff up a little bit.
Yep,
because the glass was sharp. It was like
bad.
that really thin type of glass. Anyway, we check on the resident. Find no evidence that she had anything to do with this. She physically could not have lifted that table. Even if she would have, like, with her dementia diagnosis, thought maybe she was using her walker and, like, pushed it along the way. Impossible. So the nurse comes down after we already see this, and we're like, what the heck is going on? And she thought we were calling her down there to kill a bug or something, which is another story for a whole nother time. Right. But anyway, she comes down, she takes one look in the room, and she goes, nope, and walks away. Left us there. So we proceed to get everything gathered up, cleaned up. We pick up all the pictures. We get a broom. We sweep up the glass. We get as much glass off of the portrait of Jesus as we can. I pick the table up. I put it back where it goes. We put everything neatly back on the table.
Yep.
But we look up, and on the wall, hanging up above, now I'm 5'1" for reference. This resident was much, much shorter than me.
Much shorter.
I would not have been able to reach this item. She could have, probably.
I could have, probably.
But I would not have been able to reach this item. Tell them what was hanging on the wall.
So she had a crucifix. That crucifix was literally upside down, which it was never like that. It was never placed like that. It was always in the proper position. That shit was hanging upside down, along with all this other stuff. So it's given demonic. It's bad. It's eerie. It feels weird anyway to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
That room.
With that being said, that room was terrifying. That room is also the room that had the stuffed animals in a circle and the teddy bear facing the doorway that I told about in a previous video. If you haven't seen that... With a
different patient.
Different patient,
yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that, go back and watch it. But with that being said, that room was terrifying. It always had a very dark, negative type energy.
Very eerie.
The resident herself, when she was in that room and only when she was in that room...
Weird.
If you would wake her up and she would look at you, her response was not like any other resident on the floor. It was almost as if her eyes were blank and she was staring into your soul.
Real dark, and she would just, like, stare into your soul. It was scary.
But when she was not in that room, she was bubbly. She was sweet,
laughing, confused, but okay.
Very, very, very adorable and social. Not when she was in that room. So, was there something in that room that was affecting her and decided to screw around with us that night, or got mad and decided to prove a point?
Right.
I don't know. We can't explain it.
I'll never forget it.
I know
it seems unbelievable. So happy I had witnesses, because I will never forget that night.
After that, I was very scared to go in that room alone. We used to tag team it. And, we would still go in if we were by ourselves, but we just used a lot of caution, and it really freaked us out.
I've encountered some other things there, but that by far takes the cake for me.
Terrifying.
For her, too.
One word. Terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, I hope you guys liked that story. If you have not watched my previous videos, go back, follow along, give me some likes, leave me some comments so I can keep posting and I will tell you guys more. And Carly might come back and join us for some of those, so hope you really enjoyed that. Stay tuned. Bye.
Bye.
I went to the Appalachian Mountains in November, and I saw something that to this day I still can't really explain. Back in November, me and my boyfriend decided to get a tiny home Airbnb on the side of the mountains in Asheville, North Carolina to celebrate our 1 year of dating, and it was so lovely. We were there for 2 nights and 3 days, but on the second night, something happened that I still think about pretty frequently. We were coming home from dinner that night, and we both realized that we forgot to turn the string lights on outside of the Airbnb before leaving, so we knew it was going to be pitch black when we pulled up. And as we're pulling up to the tiny home, all of a sudden, my boyfriend's headlights of his truck catch something lurking underneath the porch. For reference, this tiny home had like 2 sides of the front porch, so you couldn't get to the front door on either side of the Airbnb, which is an important detail for later. But we're seeing this thing under the porch, and it looks like from a distance it's got rounded ears and is fully black. And at this point we're thinking, oh, it might be a black bear, because they are very common in the mountains. And we're like, well, if it's a black bear, we have to be pretty careful because the mama is probably close by. So my boyfriend's like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I am just gonna get out, I'm gonna run, unlock the door, and turn the lights on for you so you could run in after me. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So my boyfriend gets out and goes to unlock the door, and he says as he's turning the key, he turns to his right and sees something sitting there perched up on the stairs of the front porch, staring at him with 2 red piercing eyes. He said that it had rounded ears, was fully black, had a very long tail, and it was almost like a cat, but the size of a Labrador retriever. At this point, he screams at it to try and scare it off, so he basically just yells in this creature's face. He said that all it did was stare at him and calmly turn and walk away. And we went inside and we talked about it afterwards, and we still can't figure out what it is. Because mountain lions are not native to North Carolina. It wasn't a bobcat because it had a long tail. He said it had red eyes and it was fully black, but jaguars don't exist in the Appalachian Mountains. Like, that's not a thing. Also, the fact that it just stared at him and calmly walked away instead of being startled like any other animal, specifically feral animal, would be in the mountains, like, I don't know. I have no idea. Call me crazy, but I think that we saw something that was not necessarily just a feral cat that night. Curious to see if anybody else has had any run-ins with feral giant cats that are strange. So, yeah.
Hi guys, I live in the Appalachian Mountains. Ooh. And I haven't lived in them my entire life, but I lived near them growing up. And as I got older and learned about the lore, and I moved back here, I was like, damn, okay, I need to familiarize myself with all the rules. So one of the things I do is I like to read and listen to other people's stories, as I know a lot of us do. But that's not just for entertainment, that's also a little bit for my own safety. So I found a story that I want to share with you guys. This is not my story, it's just one that I found on Reddit. Okay, so here we go. It's titled Growing Up in the Appalachian Mountains. I could give you a million times as a kid and a young adult I felt scared or paranoid playing in the woods. It's a beautiful place and I spent my entire childhood getting lost, not literally out there by myself or with friends. As kids, we never got too far out there, but you could actually see the progression of us venturing further and farther out as we got older because of forts and carvings we would leave. This one particular time, like 1,000 times before, my friend and I actually had just graduated high school, were out there. It was our last summer of freedom, and we spent the entire summer camping and hiking out there. We had decided to try and find a new place to set up camp and walked for what felt like a few miles before we came to a nice clearing. The area was relatively new to both of us. We got the camp set up and fire going, and the plan was to wait until nightfall, smoke some weed, and play Monopoly. For sake of backstory on my friend and I, my buddy is a smaller, real goofy guy but comes from a family of foresters and always had a deep understanding of all the trees and different plants you came across. He had no fear of going and camping out by himself. If I spent 10,000 hours in the woods, he's probably spent 50,000. As for me, I'm a taller, sturdier guy, and as we got older, I spent more time worried about women and sports, and the woods became a place for small parties. Also, I never had the balls to camp out alone. In fact, older me wouldn't go far at all when I was alone because I could never shake the feeling of being watched, which was just paranoia but still an uneasy feeling. Anyways, camp is set, fire is going, but it's getting lower and needs wood. Sun is down and we're both cutting up and having a good time. My friend is sitting on this little chair he always brought and loading up his makeshift bong, and I was crouched breaking some excess limbs off some logs we had gathered for the fire. All of a sudden, the strong breeze cuts through the clearing. I couldn't tell you if it was the suddenness of it or what, but my friend and I both stopped immediately and looked at each other. The breeze went just long enough to flicker our fire down to a small flame. We both sat completely still in an almost total darkness. Neither of us said a word. Across from us on the other side of the fire, we could hear footsteps. They sounded like somebody was running and would slow to a walk and then run again, definitely on two legs. By the sound of it, they were pacing back and forth over the same spot. Then, just like it started, it stopped with a softer crunch on the underbrush. I knew by the sound it had taken a crouch. I was crouched still and knew I was staring right at it in the dark. My friend grabbed my shoulder and said, "Buddy," and when he did, I felt the surge of fear come over me. I could feel it and hear it in him. I had been so fixed on the footsteps and rationalizing what I heard that I hadn't even considered being afraid, but this was true fear. It was raw and made me feel helpless. I could hear my friend after a while grab some leaves and drop them on the fire. For the split second the leaves covered the fire, we were in pure darkness. Then the fire sprang to life. We both quickly grabbed more leaves and brush and threw it on the fire. I got some sticks and logs on there, and neither of us took our eyes off the spot or moved much for over an hour. Finally the leaves crunched and it slowly walked off. Whatever it was had sat crouched watching us without moving for far longer than any animal would. It wasn't until after the footsteps disappeared that I realized the smell had disappeared as well. It smelled like a paper mill, spoiled eggs almost. For the rest of the night, besides whispered remarks, neither of us really moved or stopped looking at the spot. Nobody went into the tent, and I had a very short, light sleep sitting on the ground with my head rested on my hands. My friend never went to sleep. In the morning, we packed up and silently walked back home. To this day, we talk about it. In the 7 to 8 years since it happened, my forester friend has not camped by himself out there since. I feel like part of the reason that this was creepy to me is because I feel like there's like this safety in numbers kind of thing. Like, you're not supposed to go places alone when you're in the Appalachian Mountains, and like he was with his buddy. Ugh. I honestly probably wouldn't even camp out in the mountains overnight with like a group because I don't want to be having night terrors out there. I especially hate the smell of sulfur at the end. That part made my stomach flip. I also picked up on the fact that his friend called him Buddy. He didn't say his name because there's like the rule that you're not supposed to say anybody's name whenever you're in the Appalachian Mountains. You're just supposed to get their attention because then whatever is stalking you also knows what their name is. Anyways, if you have any scary stories that you want me to read, I would love to. Send them to me. I can't remember her name, but that girl whose account is like the tea after midnight, so obsessed with her videos, definitely have been influenced by her. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good night.
Sometimes places don't seem haunted during the day, but when it gets dark, the things that pretend not to exist during the day come to see you at night. And that's exactly what's happening here in this story I'm about to tell you. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story that happened in the Appalachian Mountains, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story was sent to me by Anonymous. Hey Savannah, I saw your Appalachia videos and I wanted to send you a story that's been happening to me and my wife. I would like my name to remain anonymous if that's okay. A few years ago, my grandfather passed away, and since I was his only living relative, he left me his house and farmland. My wife and I were living in Texas and relocated here in the Appalachian Mountains to live in my grandfather's house. Ever since we moved in, things have been happening, and it's honestly making me rethink moving out here. We left everything and everyone we knew back in Texas, and it would be extremely hard for us financially to leave here. I didn't visit here much growing up, so I'm not fully aware of all the rules and legends of this area, but I have done some research, and we've been following the rules to see if that will help. We moved in about a year and a half ago, and right off the bat, we would hear very weird things in the cornfield that's directly next to the house. And the weird noises always happen at night. There's no AC in this house because it's very old, so during the summertime we always sleep with the windows open, or at least did. This is a 2-story house and my wife and I sleep on the top floor, so we really didn't think too much of it, having the windows open only on the top floor. But it seemed like every night we would wake up hearing a scream coming from the cornfield. The first couple of nights we heard it, I walked outside to the edge of the cornfield and called out to see if anyone needed help. But I never heard anyone reply. My wife and I got so creeped out that we started sleeping with the window shut at night, but that didn't stop the screams and weird things happening. On top of the screams that we would hear at night, as we would get ready to lay down for bed, you could look out into the cornfield and see the tops of the corn stalks moving, like something was walking in it. I always figured it was an animal, but now I'm not really sure. During the day, things seem to be fine, other than the occasional pop or creak we can hear coming from upstairs. But again, the house is pretty old, so we just figure it's the house settling. But when night comes, fear starts to set in. Every night, pretty much, we hear tapping on the side of the house or windows, the screaming out in the cornfield, or random rapid knocks on the front door, like something is trying to get in. And all of that is creepy enough, but a few months ago, my wife and I had went to dinner, and when we got back, my wife headed into the house to get ready for bed. I had to grab something out of the back of the car, and it's pitch black outside, so I had a flashlight digging around in the trunk. I was only back there for a few minutes when I heard my wife's voice say, "Hey babe, come here." I look in the direction that it came from, which just so happened to be the cornfield. I turn my head and look up to the top floor of the house and can see my wife in the window, folding a blanket. I then hear my wife's voice again, say, "Hey babe, I'm over here, come here," which again came from the cornfield. Every hair on my body stood up and I ran inside. I went upstairs and I tell my wife what I just heard, and given that she's heard some creepy things herself, she believed me. Now fast forward to just a couple weeks ago. I'm standing in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner with my wife upstairs making our bed with the fresh sheets we washed that day. I'm drying off a bowl when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard creaking behind me like someone was standing there, but I didn't have it in me to turn around. I slowly glance up at the window, and in the reflection I see this black shadow figure standing behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing behind me, and when I turned back around and looked in the reflection again, there was nothing but me standing there. I go upstairs to see if my wife was there or if she had come down to the kitchen, and she's upstairs struggling to put the bedsheet on. I asked her if she was just downstairs, and she looked at me and said, "No, why?" I told her what I had seen, and she turned pale as a ghost. She sat down and asked me if it smiled at me. I told her no, it didn't do that. It was just standing there. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said the other night when she was in the kitchen, she was looking out the window but heard something creak behind her. And when her eyes focused on the window's reflection, she saw a tall black figure standing there, smiling at her. I asked her why she didn't say anything, and she told me that she didn't want me to worry about it. In newest events a few nights ago, I went to take the trash out behind the house and I heard scratching and banging noises coming from the barn, right behind the house. We keep it locked at all times and we haven't been in there in a while, so I know nothing should be in there. I wasn't about to go check it out, so I just went back inside. That same night, my wife was upstairs laying in bed, reading on her Kindle in the dark. Our bed is up against a wall, and directly across from our bed is a wall with a window. The moon was shining bright that night, so it filled the whole room with light, enough for my wife to see as she's sitting in bed. She noticed that the room got a lot darker, then back to bright. So she glances up at the window, but didn't see anything at first. But as she's looking at the window, she said a black figure crossed in front of the window, like it was walking by it. But just as a reminder, our bedroom is on the top floor, which is easily 15 feet up from the ground. We have no idea what she saw, but it terrifies us just to think about it. I'm really not sure what to do. It seems like things just keep happening, but we really don't have the money to pick up and move again. I just pray that things will calm down and that the black shadow will leave, because every time I close my eyes, I see it staring at me in the window. I'm going to need y'all's help in the comments on this one because I really don't know what this could be. There's just so many paranormal things happening to them in this house, like the screaming out in the cornfield, it mimicking the wife's voice, the black shadow figure that both of them seen, and the wife saw it smiling at her. Banging and scratching, it moving in front of the window when the window is 15 feet off the ground. The only thing I could think of to do would be to pray over the land and pray over the house, because honestly, it seems like there's just multiple things here. I don't want to say it's just one specific thing. It sounds like a collection of paranormal things. But regardless, it's absolutely terrifying, and I couldn't imagine packing your life up and going somewhere else and all of these paranormal things happening to you. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. They do not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. It can be any paranormal experience you've been through. You can email me at this email right here on the screen or the email in the caption. But as always, thank you so much for being here and watching. It truly means the world to me. And I hope you know how much I love you, because it's a lot. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Did you know there's actual vampire lore in the Appalachian Mountains? According to local lore, there was an incident where farm animals were found dead, drained of blood, and dismembered. The town drunk and a traveling salesman were found in the same condition. This was in Big Stone Gap, Virginia in the 1890s during the coal boom. There was a man named Rupp that the townspeople suspected of doing this. He was reclusive and lived in a cabin in the woods. Children that were nosing around his cabin reportedly saw him eating raw meat. The story goes that he disappeared after all this happened and no one ever saw him again. There aren't any newspaper accounts of this, but it's a widely known story that's been told over and over for years. This happened in the 1890s, right around the time Dracula was published, when vampire hysteria was going wild. Some people think that if this Mr. Rupp really did this, that he possibly could have even been a real cannibal. I looked through records in Big Stone Gap to see if I could find a man named Rupp, and I did find some German families with the last name Rupp living there during this time. So what do you think? Was he a vampire, a cannibal, or just someone simply falsely accused?
What would you do if your sister almost drowned and then came back from the lake alive, but she brought something back with her? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who said that their sister had survived, but that wasn't the end of it. My sister almost drowned when she was 19. That part is true and simple. She went to the lake with friends over 4th of July weekend, got too far out, panicked, and had to be pulled back in. Everybody treated it like a bad scare after that. They said she swallowed a lot of water, she freaked herself out and sat in the ER for a few hours, then got sent home. She came back the next day. At first, she just seemed quiet. That by itself didn't mean much. My sister was loud by nature, always talking, always moving, always halfway into somebody else's business. So when she got home looking pale and barely spoke, my mom chalked it up to shock. My dad said she just needed rest. I remember hugging her in the kitchen, and the first thing I noticed was how cold she felt. Not cool skin from being outside, cold all the way through. I actually pulled back and asked if she felt okay, and she just shrugged and said she was tired. That first week, she slept a lot during the day and barely ate. At night, though, I'd hear her awake in the bathroom, and at first it sounded like normal sick person stuff. Gagging and running water, spitting into the sink. My mom kept saying her stomach probably still wasn't settled from swallowing lake water. Then one night, I heard something else. I was in my room, almost asleep, when I heard this awful, wet coughing sound from the bathroom we shared. It went on much longer than a normal coughing fit, long enough that I got out of bed and went to check on her. The door was cracked, and she was bent over the sink with both hands gripping the counter. Her shoulders were shaking like she was throwing up, but there was nothing in the sink except black water. Not dark water from makeup or dirt. Black, thin and shiny under the bathroom light. I said her name, and she whipped around so fast I jumped. There was long hair hanging out of her mouth. Not hers. Long, dark strands caught between her teeth and stuck to her chin with that same black water. I just stared. She stared back for 1 second and then grabbed the hair with both hands and yanked the rest of it out of her mouth like she was pulling a string. I screamed. She looked furious more than embarrassed and slammed the bathroom door in my face. When I told my parents what I saw, nobody reacted the way they should have. My mom thought I had panicked and made it bigger in my head. My dad thought maybe it was her own hair from the lake somehow tangled in her throat when she threw up. Even saying that now sounds insane. At the same time, somehow, everybody wanted a normal explanation badly enough that they reached for whatever was closest. My sister didn't help. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She even laughed when I brought it up and told me I needed sleep. But her laugh sounded thin, forced, and when she smiled, I saw something dark caught between two back teeth before she turned away. After that, things got worse fast. She stopped sleeping in her bed, and more than once I woke up and found her standing by the bedroom window just looking outside. Not moving, not on her phone, just standing there in the dark. Her room started smelling bad too, like lake mud and mildew. My mom accused her of leaving wet towels everywhere, and she just smiled that little smile and said she'd clean it up. Then I started hearing her talk at night. Not on the phone, not talking in her sleep, talking low like somebody standing too close to hear clearly through the wall. One night, I got close enough to her door to listen. She was saying over and over, "I brought you back, I brought you back, I brought you back." Then there was a pause. Then she laughed softly and said, "I know you're still hungry." I stopped breathing for a second, and the next morning I looked under her bed while she was downstairs because by then I had reached the point where I knew something was in that room with her, even if I didn't know what. There were damp clumps of hair under there. Not 1 or 2 strands, clumps. And a dead fish. Not a whole big fish, more like something half rotted and dragged in from the lake, already smelling bad enough that I gagged. I told my parents again, and this time my mom finally got scared. They tried to make my sister go back to the hospital, but she refused. My dad physically reached for her arm, and she jerked away so hard she knocked a kitchen chair over. I had never seen her move that fast. And that same night was the worst one. I woke up because I heard water dripping, steady and slow. I sat up and realized the sound was coming from my bedroom floor. My sister was standing at the foot of my bed. Her night clothes were soaked. Water was dripping off the hem and pooling onto the wood. Her hair was hanging in strings around her face, and she was smiling at me. And her mouth was full. I didn't understand what I was looking at for a second. It looked more like hair jammed between her lips until she opened them wider, and I saw it wasn't only hair. It was weeds. Mud, something pale caught between her teeth that looked too much like a part of a small fish spine. Then she leaned her head to one side, and black water started running out of her mouth onto the floor. I started screaming for my parents. She came toward me then, fast. Not lunging exactly, more like she folded down over the bed in a way that made my whole body lock up. Her hands landed on the mattress by my legs, and her face got close enough that I could smell the lake on her breath. And in this soaked, ruined voice that only sort of sounded like her, she said, "It was dark down there." My dad hit the bedroom light and she jerked back so hard she nearly fell. My mom was right behind him, and all three of us were yelling at once. My sister backed into the wall, still dripping, still smiling, and then suddenly she looked terrified, like she had just woken up somewhere unfamiliar. She started crying, real crying this time, sobbing hard she couldn't stand up straight, and my parents got her to the hospital that night. She stayed there for almost a week. I never got a clear answer about what they thought was going on. My parents kept it vague. Stress, trauma, some kind of episode. They changed the subject every time I asked for specifics. All I know is this. When my mom and I went back into her room the next day to bag up clothes for her, the carpet by the bed was still damp. And under the bed, where I had seen the fish before, there was a line of wet hair leading all the way to the wall, just stopping there, like whatever had been hiding under the bed had finally gone back to where it belonged. My sister came home quieter after that, different, but more like herself than before. She never talked about the lake, she never talked about that night, and she moved out the next year and now lives 3 states away. We still talk, but there are things I can tell she does not want me bringing up. And I don't either. But sometimes when a sink gurgles in the middle of the night, I still think about the sound of her pulling that hair from her mouth. And I still won't go near that lake. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
If you're alone right now and it's dark, I'd rather you not listen to this story because this story is one of the most disturbing stories you're about to hear. A woman said that when her son was little, he would cry every night. He would tell her that supposedly there was a boy under his bed copying everything that he did. He claimed that if he blinked, he blinked. If he smiled, he smiled. If he spoke, he spoke. She was super confused with everything, so one day she decided to check under the bed. However, nothing was there. Since there was nothing in the bed, she laughed, she tucked him in and went to bed, and around 2 a.m, she claimed that he came screaming to her room, saying that whoever was living under his bed touched his hand. She then turned on all the lights and checked underneath the bed. Still nothing. However, she did notice there was some scratches that were marked. The boy was super traumatized. He kept repeating, "It touched my hand, it touched my hand," and for like about 3 weeks, he slept with his mom. The creepiest part is that years later, after they moved out, the family that was supposed to move in or that moved in their house contacted contacted her and said, "When your boy was little, did he say that there was a boy living under his bed?" And honestly, this story is super freaking scary.
America's most famous trail has a dark side. Pull up a chair and let's talk about the dark history of the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail attracts more than 3 million visitors every single year. Today, it runs more than 2,190 miles across 14 states. We have the Appalachian Trail because in 1921, a planner named Benton McKay proposed a footpath running down the Appalachian Mountains. And between 1925 and 1937, both private and volunteer loggers and federal workers volunteered to hack the contiguous trail into the Appalachian Mountains from Georgia to Maine, a gargantuan effort that took almost 15 years. Over the decades, the trail and the mountain corridors around the Appalachian Trail picked up a darker history of murders, fatal accidents, exposure deaths, assaults, and missing person cases. Make sure you stick around to the end, because on this trail, people have vanished when the path was only feet away. In Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Tennessee-North Carolina line, a young boy named Dennis Martin disappeared in 1969 during a family outing. Search teams covered a huge area and never found him. And in 1976, during a school trip in the Smokies, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson disappeared without a trace. And to this day, neither of those cases have been solved. In 2013, hiker Geraldine Jerry Largay stepped off the Appalachian Trail in Maine to relieve herself and couldn't find her way back. Searchers found her remains more than 2 years later, less than 700 feet from the trail. Unfortunately, the Appalachian Trail isn't just home to missing persons cases. Several acts of violence have been known to occur on the trail as well. Viewer discretion is advised for this next bit. In 1990, hikers found the bodies of Jeff Hood and Molly LaRue near a shelter south of Duncannon, Pennsylvania. Their killer was still on the trail when their bodies were discovered. Rangers and police tracked him down days later in Harper's Ferry. In the southern Appalachians, serial killer Gary Michael Hilton targeted hikers in North Carolina and Georgia in 2007 and 2008, and Hilton is now known as the National Forest Killer. And in one of the saddest cases, in Shenandoah National Park, very near the AT, Laura Lolly Winans and Julianne Julie Williams were murdered at their campsite near Skyland Resort in 1996. Their case remained open and cold for decades. But finally, in 2024, the FBI identified Walter Leo Jackson Sr. as the killer. Unfortunately, assaults on the trail didn't end there. In 2019, a man attacked hikers with a machete on the Appalachian Trail in Virginia, killing one and severely injuring another. Situations like this, while they are shocking, are not the norm. Hiking the AT is an incredibly rewarding and enjoyable experience for thousands every single year. But again, even though a situation might not happen all the time, it can happen. And if you love the great outdoors, a little preparation and listening to your gut can keep you safe every time you're out there. You'll find more dark histories, mysteries, and folklore on my profile.
I planned on bringing this last night, but I had to make sure I had the proper permissions and everything. So without further ado, postscript. On the night I finished proofreading the manuscript for this book, I had a very bizarre experience, which I am sure is connected to La Llorona. 2 days later, another strange thing occurred, and I believe very strongly that these events are interconnected. Both occurred at my house near Rodeo Road in Santa Fe, which I understand to be an area that had many La Llorona sightings before the developers started building houses there in the 1960s. Before then, Rodeo Road and the area around it was a desolate but beautiful area full of arroyos and chamisa bushes where people came to hunt rabbits, ride horses, and take walks. The first incident occurred on a cold night in February when I was telling my husband about some of the stories I had read that day. I was standing outside the bedroom in the doorway, and my husband was lying on the bed. I had just turned my back and was walking away when I felt a presence behind me just inside the bedroom door. It was so strong that I jerked my head around to see who was there. Of course, there was no one, but I felt as though I could have reached out and easily touched whoever it was. 2 days later, I was alone in the house with my two sons, then 4 and 6. We were all seated at the kitchen table eating supper. Suddenly, Robert, the little one, turned and looked in the direction of the same place where I had felt the presence 2 days before. He jumped down from the chair and yelled, "Daddy!" and ran towards something that only he could see, his arms outstretched in anticipation. Frightened, I also jumped up and ran after Robert and grabbed his shoulders. "What did you see?" I asked him. For the next few minutes, Robert insisted that he had seen someone. Finally, he said, maybe it was a cat. When he understood that it could not have been a cat, he said, "I saw something there, and it was gray." He would not back down from his story. What he saw was as real to him as anything he had ever seen. I set the boys down at the table and forced myself to walk through the house. I checked the closets, under the beds, everywhere. The windows and the doors were locked. We were alone in the house. Someone told me later that La Llorona would sometimes appear to women with young children. Remembering that my neighbor also had 2 little boys, I mentioned it to her the next day and asked her if she had ever had a similar experience or had ever heard a woman weeping in the Greenbelt area next to her house. She looked at me strangely and said, "How funny you should ask me that. Last weekend I heard a terrible scream. At first I thought it was a cat, but it didn't really sound like a cat at all. My husband and I couldn't figure out what it was." I believe that my neighbor heard and what my son saw was La Llorona. So a word to the wise. Do not read these stories with a skeptical heart, or you too may summon La Llorona to your home. Now this is from the book from Judith Shaw Beatty, La Llorona, Encounters with the Weeping Woman, and that is what her proofreader or editor, publisher, one of the people who read her manuscript, that was their true experience of what what happened to them after reading her book. And I wanted to make sure that I had all the permissions in place to use that before I shared it with you. But I could not recommend the book any more highly. It's really great, and I learned a lot of things about La Llorona that even blew my mind. And I've been reading paranormal stories all my life. That's been Jay's Haunted Appalachia for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed the story, and please check out the La Llorona Encounters with the Weeping Woman book by Judith Shaw Beatty, and keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.
Apparently, there's a new monster in town in Appalachia, and it is known as the Appalachian Grabber. And I know that may sound a little hokey, a little too fictional maybe, but according to some people, it's very real, and it has ruined people's lives. There isn't really a whole lot of information about this grabber, but allegedly, in at least a few cases, here's what happens. People go out into the forest, into the mountains of Appalachia, all by themselves, completely alone, maybe in an abandoned house, cabin, or just a secluded place in the forest. This Appalachian grabber will then attack physically, but more important, mentally. Some people have claimed that it has ruined their lives. Normal people who had everyday lives like you and I was never the same once they came in contact with it. Their family was divided. They spent time in jail. And apparently this isn't just a one and done case. It's beginning to happen more and more often. If Appalachia wasn't scary.
I live in the heart of Appalachia, and this is easily the most terrifying story of one of my experiences. Y'all, I live in Canada, and this story had me not wanting to go outside. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta, series where I crochet something creepy and talk about something even creepier. Let's get into it. This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend, I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. If we know anything about Appalachia, we know that that is not a good sign. If you know anything about being in the woods, you know that's not a good sign. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking.
So listen to me.
Y'all want to hear another story time? This one is actually about the time I met like a older spirit, maybe from like the 1940s or something. And this one I was working in a grocery store. Okay, so I'm at work, I'm stocking deodorant, and all of a sudden it was a really bright light that came in through a window. Where I'm stocking from, it's kind of like the window was right there, and what was shining through was like, it's like the sun was like overly beaming, but it was like, I don't want to say artificial, but it just looked surreal. I don't want to say like your light flash before your eyes type of light, because I wouldn't know. But at the same time, it was like, it was a surreal moment. Like the light just shined bright and everything around me got silent. That's another thing I noticed, that it got really silent. Like I could only hear one thing. The one thing that I heard was her footsteps. Like I heard her walking up to me, but it was kind of like she was walking in slow motion, and you can hear like clanks of her heels, but not like the fat ass wedge heels. You know what I'm talking about? Like them heels that motherfuckers be wearing, but they not heels, but they heels. Like, they're like fat. And they was like flapping, but it was like in literal slow motion. I'm not playing. Okay, another thing I noticed is that my heart dropped. Like I said in my previous video, whenever my heart dropped, it's an energy around me that's like different. Like it's just an energy shift. That's how my body detects that something around me is not natural to the environment, I guess. I also couldn't move. So as she was walking up to me, and I'm thinking, like, why the fuck did my heart drop? And like, I'm paying attention to everything that's going on, but at the same time, I'm still confused as to, like, what am I feeling? It's just a customer walking up. My head, I can finally turn my head, so I turn my head, like, and then I'm like, hi. I said, hi, right? This bitch smiled, like, hi. She smiled, but it's kind of like, you can see her teeth through her smile. Like, it was like an x-ray. Like, that's what her mouth looked like. It looked like an x-ray, and I thought I was fucking tripping, but I was not tripping because my heart dropped even lower. So in that moment, like, I was scared as a bitch, but I'm like, I'm not gonna show no reaction. I'm very good at not showing that I'm scared, from previous experience that happened in my life. But I was just like, you have a good day. And she was like, you too. Now her whole get up, her whole outfit, why I say 1940s is because she had a big ass rim sun hat on. Like, she had a sun hat on. She had a dress on that I think it was either white, pure white, or it had like some sunflowers or something on it. But it was kind of like she was very old, but she wasn't wrinkly. Like, it's kind of like her, I don't even remember her skin tone. It was kind of like translucent. I don't really remember. It was like, it was a surreal moment. Like, everything was like at a standstill. There was nobody. It was damn near like it was nobody in the store in that moment. Everything got quiet until she left the fucking aisle. Like, it was just odd. So after she smiled at me, and I can see her fucking teeth through her smile of her not opening her mouth like it was a fucking x-ray, I literally turned back and started stocking the deodorants again. But she lingered there for a second though. Like, she didn't move. I think she wanted to see if I was gonna react. But I'm like, bitch, you don't exist to me. When she walked back out the aisle, and like, I can hear her footsteps going away in slow motion, the light dimmed. The light went back to like a normal light. Like, the sun wasn't shining through the window no more. So that's how I knew that that whatever the fuck it was wasn't human.
I saw a video of a little girl absolutely terrified to go into her room at the Great Wolf Lodge, and I told you guys about this place over a year ago. So last year, a family of 4 was staying here, and the dad booked 2 rooms that were adjoined by a door. So the kids were staying on the side with the bunk beds, and the adults were staying on the side with a regular queen-size bed. They had a great day. They come back, they all go to sleep, and around midnight, the 6-year-old runs into the parents' side of the room, hysterically crying. His dad is like, what's wrong? Are you okay? Did you have a bad dream? And the child said, no, I saw something. It was like a big kid, a shadow walking around the room. I had to run past it to get here. Now, the dad was positive he had locked the exterior doors to both of their hotel rooms, but he went to check anyway, didn't see anything, came back, and just shrugged it off. At this point now, the little boy is sleeping with his parents. At 3 a.m., the wife wakes up. She's frantically looking around, which wakes her husband up, and her husband's like, what's going on? And she's like, you seriously didn't hear someone just scream, Mom? So the dad obviously goes to the other side of the rooms to check on his daughter, and he finds her hyperventilating in a corner. The daughter is sobbing, and she tells her father, run, he is still in here. Now the dad is turning all of the lights on, checking closets, looking literally everywhere he can to make sure that no one is in here, because this is freaking weird. So the dad is asking his daughter, what did you see? And she said, at first I thought you were coming towards me, but then I realized this thing was much taller and skinnier than you. She said it also had paper white skin, this very long, unhuman-like neck, and didn't appear to have many facial features. Her dad was like, are you sure it wasn't just a blanket? You weren't seeing things? And she said, no, it walked straight up to me. And then I covered myself with the blankets, and when I pulled the blankets down, I saw it walking towards your room. She said she crawled out of her bunk bed and went and hid in a corner, and said she stayed as quiet as she could so that the thing wouldn't notice her. She said she truly thought it was going to kill her, and so she was hiding in the corner, hyperventilating out of fear, trying to stay as quiet as possible. So the mom was like, well, if you were trying to stay as quiet as possible, why did you scream Mom at the top of your lungs? The daughter says, no, I never said anything at all because I was so scared and trying to be quiet. And it gets crazier. So the dad looks just to make sure there's no way a human is possibly inside. and there is no way. And he decides, I'm just going to stay up till daylight. His wife took about an hour to finally fall back asleep. While he was searching the room, he had turned on the closet light, and suddenly, a little bit after his wife falls asleep, the light cuts off and it will not come back on. But then suddenly, he hears these loud bangs coming from the adjoining door, and he kept trying to convince himself that's the front door, that's someone knocking on the front door, that's not the adjoining door, but he knew it was. He felt vulnerable just laying there letting it happen, so he decided, I have to get up and check. Well, when he opens the door, the lights are still on in the bunk bed room. No one's there. Everything's fine. He lays back down. Then his wife starts absolutely panicking in her dream, and so he's trying to wake her up, assuming she's having a night terror. When she wakes up, she tells him that she had in her dream woken up in the same exact bed in the same room, had went to the bathroom, but when she came back out, she was suddenly stuck in the bunk bed room. She said while she was in there, that evil entity was trying to get her, and so she was banging on this door, trying to get her husband to let her inside. She said she was frantically pounding, and then he ends up waking her up. So it's finally morning, and they decide to ask the 6-year-old what exactly he saw, because they didn't ask him too many questions that night. They wanted him to go back to bed. He described this thing exactly like the sister did, but said this thing was talking in a language he didn't understand, and his eyes glowed like their cats at home. Immediately after, they all pack up their stuff, and they are out of there. They still had a vacation left to have, and they were like, nope, we're done. Fully believe little kids can see and hear things that we can't, even animals. So it's absolutely chilling to see a little girl so freaked out to go into the room. So seeing that reminded me of this story, and there are so many more that have happened at the Great Wolf Lodge that I'm being told about. If you guys want to hear that, let me know.